Hey, Mix Coachers. This week on the podcast, we're excited to bring you a phone interview that Kevin did with Joe West. Kevin was in his studio in LA, and Joe was actually on the front porch of his studio, the West Barn, in Franklin, Tennessee. This episode's a little bit longer than normal, but we know you're going to love this interview.
Hey guys, I think you're going to love today's guest on the podcast. My guest today is Joe West from Nashville. Joe is a real renaissance man, if I can say that, of music production. He owns a studio in Franklin called the West Barn, and it's been featured in Mix Magazine. Joe is a Grammy-winning producer, and he's mixed guys like Justin Timberlake, Jimmy Wayne, Warren Zevon, and Joey and Rory. He not only produces and mixes, but he also writes. He's written number one songs for Keith Urban, Tim McGraw, and Jimmy Wayne. And like most guys that I respect the most, Joe shares his knowledge through YouTube videos, his Waves audio. He's in pretty tight with Waves, and he does a lot of cool stuff for them. He does videos, and he does something we're going to talk about a little bit more in the show, one-on-one mentoring. So, Joe, hopefully I did that justice. Hopefully you can fill in the gaps, because your sheet is so long of things that I found about you. It's just so cool. Welcome to the podcast. Thanks for taking some time out and talking to me today.
Thanks, buddy. Yeah, you did great. I should travel with someone like you.
Well,
it's always awkward when people say, "Hey, tell me a little bit about your career." Then you're going to sit there and tell them things. Just don't feel like Yeah, it's all right. Go ahead.
My mama taught me not to brag on myself, but some of this, man, if I were putting myself in this position, it would feel a lot like I was bragging. But you've actually done it, man. This is when I said Renaissance man, I almost didn't want to say it, because I know that's kind of I don't know, but you have actually, you've actually done all of the stuff here that I strive to do in my career, and I think a lot of people do. You're not just one thing. You've been successful at a lot of things, and I want to break some of that stuff down, if that's cool with you. So
yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your history. You're in Nashville now, but you haven't always been in Nashville. Give me a little short timeline of how you got to Nashville.
I think that my history has a lot to do with me being a jack of all trades. I was raised in Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh's a secondary market. I didn't have the ability to go to a recording school. I wanted to go to Berkeley in Boston. I got accepted there, but the money never really showed up in order for me to be able to do that. And my father, who was a steel worker, said, "Hey, why don't you go up to Pittsburgh and sweep the floors at a television studio?" And I thought, well, that's a pretty good idea. So I actually went up to a recording studio. A friend of mine was taking a program at a school that was meeting at a recording studio. And I asked the guy if I could sweep his floors, and he said, "Oh, I don't need a janitor. I need an engineer." And I said, "Oh, I could do that." And thanks to this guy's great patience, he took me under his wing and really guided my career. Really, I thanked him at the Grammys 30 years later, because he was, I thanked him, my wife, and my parents. So it really was, without him, I wouldn't exist. Greg Vizza is his name, at Audiomation Studios. But at that studio, I got the ability, because it was a secondary market, during a given day, I would work on a death metal record, to posting and mixing the Mr. Rogers show, to doing a gospel record at night. That could be one day for me. So I didn't have the luxury of just focusing on a style of music I loved. I got to really be a student of engineering across a very wide platform, pushing the envelope in a lot of ways, because even though we were a large format studio that looked like it should be in Mix Magazine, we didn't really have New York City money. So we were working with, very limited equipment and antiquated gear that was made in the back room to do telephone tie-ins. And, we really had to push the envelope to do what we wanted to do. But we had a mission statement that, hey, if you try something 100 times, odds are you're going to make it 99. And we lived by that.
That's cool. So how long have you been in Nashville?
I'm sorry. Then from Pittsburgh, went to New York City for a decade, and then spent 10 years there, met my wife, and then came down to Nashville in, I think, 2001, and made a record with Emmylou Harris, the producers were Daniel Landwall and Malcolm Byrne, and we made a record with Emmylou Harris. So I got to spend a month down here, and then came back down to do some stuff with Warren Zevon, and then made a decision that this is where we needed to be. So we loaded up the truck and moved to Tennessee.
That's a line that only a songwriter could come up with.
Someone did come up with it for the Beverly Hillbillies.
Yeah, but it wasn't Tennessee, was it?
Right, yeah, Beverly.
Yeah, so, okay, so you said you came to Nashville to do a record for Emmylou. Were you just hired in to be an engineer for the producers?
Yeah, this is a great story that I tell a lot of my buddies that are passionate about engineering that are coming up. I had been doing a record. I'd been doing a bunch of records for an artist in New York City whose father was the president of BMG Distribution. So we had made these great records, and I just really loved this artist. And after about 3 or 4 of them, he had the opportunity, and he kind of came to me timidly to tell me that he was going to go work with this Grammy Award winning producer, Malcolm Byrne. And rather than sort of give him some attitude, I was just elated for him, and I said, "Hey man, I had a U-47 that he sounded great on, and some Neumann V-72s. I said, take this. This sounds great on you if you want to use this as your vocal chain." And so they went off and made this record, and then after the record was done, they were unhappy with the mixes, so they asked me to mix the record. So I mixed the record, and the producer ended up loving it, and then I went on to do a Sparkle Horse record with him and a Rachel Yamagata record, and then he asked me to go down and make the Emmylou Harris record with him. He had done Red Dirt Girl, which had won a Grammy maybe, I think. And so we did Stumble into Grace together, and Dan Landwall, which is one of my idols, came on and produced for a while on that record. I got to engineer under him, and it was a great experience getting into Nashville and getting the whole vibe down here, and just sort of instantly falling in love with it. That record eventually was nominated for a Grammy. It did not win, but ironically, the record that won was the Warren Zevon record, which I had worked on as well for the same category. They were both nominated in 2002, I believe.
It's a double-edged sword, right? To be nominated, you split your own vote. That's terrible. But Warren Zevon won, so you come out ahead there. That's good.
I did. The Grammys are a funny thing. There's a bunch of logistics on whether you get a statue or not. I didn't get a statue for it because I only worked on the one single on the Warren Zevon record. So, but it was nonetheless a Grammy Award-winning record, and anytime you can be a part of a record that gets recognized like that, you're doing something right.
Yeah. So you decided after that record. By the way, which studios did you work in on the Emmylou record?
We started off. Lucinda Williams and her husband had a bed and breakfast in East Nashville. This was before East Nashville was the posh East Nashville that it is today. So it was a little bit suspect, and we were in this little house right up against the road there near the French Quarter, and you'd hear Harley Davidsons driving by, and the 100-year-old glass in the house would quake, and it was in the flight pattern for BNA, so it was a bit of a mess. So we abandoned that and went to Masterlink, which is now Southern Ground, Zach Brown's studio. But we did some at Masterlink. Then we left Masterlink and really did the majority of that record over at Sound Emporium, Studio A.
Oh, yeah. Love Sound Emporium.
It's great.
Yeah. So then you decided after that, after working in Nashville, catching the vibe that you were going to go ahead and move, and you moved in 2001?
Yeah. I just thought they were making records that were the records I was supposed to be making.
Yeah.
Keith Urban had just come out, and it just felt like an Eagles record. To me, that's where it was at. In New York City, all my stuff was, as a songwriter, my stuff was just a little bit too old school rock and roll, 70s rock. I was into some stuff like Journey and Foreigner, but I really loved the Eagles. I loved Brad. I loved anything that would be like a sort of a soft rock 70s thing that had a great lyrical content and just really sweet major 7 chords, anything that sort of get you going. So Nashville was making those records with Keith Urban, and with Rascal Flatts. So I just felt like, man, this is where I've got to be. This is where I'm supposed to be. So my wife had a really good job, and me being a musician, and producer, man, it was just insane for us to do it with a 1-year-old baby. But we felt called, and it felt like it was where we were supposed to be. So we did it.
Yeah, that's cool. So did you build your studio right away, or did you just freelance for a while?
No, when I first came to town, I I rented a large ISO booth off of 8th Avenue. It was very big. It was like 16 foot across by 22 foot long. So it was a really big ISO booth. So I made a lot of records there. And then the problem was it was a producer's studio, and then I ended up the place started to revolve around me because I had so many things happening, so many sessions. And I think you had too many people in his kitchen, and ended up, he asked me to leave. So we did that. We moved to RCA Studio C on the road. There's a couple of historic studios. Studio A was the giant room that all the, a lot of Sinatra records were done, and Patsy Cline and Elvis, big scoring. And then B is the famous room that almost every Elvis record was done in. C was Chet Atkins' room. But it was just it was this small little studio that was almost like a multi-purpose closet. It wasn't very big at all. So I had that place for a couple of years and ended up having my first #1 out of that room as a songwriter and a producer. It's this little dumpy room that was just impossible to mix in, but with enough running back and forth in my car, we made it sound good enough to get on the radio.
What song was that?
That was Jimmy Wayne, Do You Believe Me Now?
Oh, I remember that song, man. That was great.
Yeah, that was a big change.
Yeah.
In your career, you notice when things are different. Things were different after that.
So let's talk a little bit about your. I want to get back to your studio because I've seen pictures of it and I love the vibe of it. But I want to talk about how do you go from being a guy just renting an extra room on Music Row to writing a #1 song for Jimmy Wayne. Tell me kind of some of the key pieces that went into place for that to happen.
I don't think that they're distinctly connected. I just think it's like trying to make rent. I remember when I used to live paycheck to paycheck and I was worried about the lighting bill, Now I worry about things on a yearly basis, and I think, okay, it'll work out at the end of the year. I don't have to sweat the 30th of the month anymore. So, I was just looking for a place to make music. Mm-hmm. So I was just rocking along, and in the process, I was writing every day. I was producing every day. I was mixing every day. That was tough for me because my body never wanted to do that. I always wanted to be mixing a record and I'm doing that this week. But on any given day, like today, after I do this, I'm going to go down and I'm helping my wife with a voiceover thing. So after that, I've got to mix some stuff for a client. Then I've got to listen to a master that came back from New York City. Then after that, I'm doing some film stuff. So my days every day is a little bit of writing, a little bit of mixing, a little bit of producing. So that was just a nonstop cycle I was learning to do during that era. And at the end of it, a byproduct of always working, my father used to say that even a broken watch is right twice a day. Mm-hmm. You're going to look down at one point during the day and that watch is going to be right twice. And it doesn't take that long. It's a numbers game. Mm-hmm. And with some inspiration, when you finally do some great work, enough of it, every once in a while it will creep through the hole and you'll have a hole in one. And Jimmy Wayne was a product of probably 3 years of nonstop writing every day, mixing, producing every day, and then just having an opportunity to write with him. And then he didn't write that song, but on the way out, I asked him if I could play it for him. I played it for him. And he fell in love with it, and he played it for his label. We had a finished record at that point. He had done it with Mark Bright and with Nathan Chapman. And after he played the single for Scott Bruschetta at Big Machine, Scott called a half hour later and held up the phone in the promotions department. He said, "Congratulations, this is your new single." So I went on to produce 10 songs on that record. They threw out sort of the old record and redid the record with me, and I wrote a couple songs on it, one of which was Do You Believe Me Now, that was a big hit for him.
Yeah. So this is a selfish question. I'm always fascinated by daily habits, daily like morning rituals and stuff. I mean, I'm a kind of a student of this guy named Tim Ferriss who is obsessed with that whole daily thing too. So I'm kind of interested in a guy that writes, produces, has a studio, does film stuff, and and teaches, which we're going to talk about hopefully in just a minute. Teaching everything that you do. How do you do all that in a given day? Or is it a weekly thing? Or is it, I mean, just selfishly, I'd like to know how I can, plan my day a little bit better so that I can get to all the stuff that I want to do.
I find that it's like working in an emergency room. So it's like triage. You look around your specific beds that have projects in them, and you decide which one is the biggest priority. I've always been a person that enjoys doing a lot of things. So if I were just a tracking engineer, I would really tire quickly of that. So I like it. It's part of my personality. I just sort of figure out what it is I need to get done short term and long term, and I try to build a schedule that works. And, some days I don't have anything to do. I still have days like that in my career where I'm just like, I could manufacture some work today, but the reality is nobody's going to be blowing up my phone if it doesn't show up. So, it's just a matter of figuring out what it is I need to be getting done. And on a given day, I may be a songwriter. On a given day, I may be mixing a record. Some days I still engineer. Some of my friends will ask me to engineer something, and I'll gladly get behind the console and just shut up, which is fun too. I enjoy that. That's where I started. So there's a joy in being great as a part of a bigger team that does something incredible. Mm-hmm. We just did a session at my barn where we had 48 inputs going at one time, which is a big session. We had 48 different things, 10 people around the room. The whole record went down live. It was like a Garrison Keillor Prairie Home Companion kind of thing. And it's a beautiful record. It's one of my favorite records of the year. And I was just an engineer, so I enjoy that as well.
So I noticed on your some of your discography that you did some work for Joey and Rory, and that was actually one of the records that you won a Grammy on recently, I guess. Now, before you tell me anything about, I'd love to hear some studio stories. I hear the bird in the background. You must be outside.
I'm on my porch. This is my morning ritual. I usually get up and have a cigar and a coffee. I got a German Shepherd that's running around back here.
Oh, that's so cool, man. Living the life. Well, so I noticed I discovered Joey and Rory several years ago, and as a matter of fact, I even reached out to them just because, and I don't do that too much. But anyway, they struck me as such a genuine couple, being great songwriters, great artists, and I noticed that they did a video in a barn, and I just assumed it was their barn, but that was actually your studio. Is that right?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about those sessions where you did the Hymns That Are Important to Us record that you won a Grammy for. Break that down a little bit. How did that timeline work?
Well, me and Rory had been buddies. When I first moved to town, Rory wanted to sign me to his publishing company. Him and Tim Johnson had a publishing company called Giant Slayer under S1, which was a major publisher. And it didn't work out. I ended up signing with Sony and Mark Bright, who was producing a lot of Carrie Under records and Rascal Flatts records at the time. So it was a better fit for me musically. But I ended up always staying great friends with those guys and writing with them. And, we were just buddies. And then over the years, he'd asked me to maybe mix something here or there. And we were just friends of one another. And then he said, hey, man, we'd love for you to produce this record, help me produce it, and make this record out at your place. And that was the first Inspired record, which was a big hit for them. It was on the Gaithers label through Capitol. And so we made that record. They shot that video at the barn. It was a very successful record for them. But the Hymns record was a record that had relevance because the story of her life really, even being on the record, hearing that record, I had heard those hymns before, but I really heard them differently through the voice of somebody that was transitioning from one life to another. Mm-hmm. So it was a really incredible story that was coupled with a record. I think that record won the Grammy because it was just a compelling life story that everyone has 0 degrees of separation with cancer. Mm-hmm. And Joey and Rory were brave enough to live their life transparently. So in essence, they were telling all of our stories. So we all felt like they were speaking for us in a way, and they did it so beautifully that it was just a special record. Every decade, maybe you're a part of a record that is, you just know it while you're on it, that you got to make sure you get it right. And that was a record I knew I had to get right. And thankfully we did. It was a gold record. It was the number 1 country record for 4 weeks in a row above Carrie Underwood and every star that's there. It was the number 1 record selling in the United States, all genre, for 1 week. So better than Adele. And it's a record of hymns. So that's a spectacular story. And to be a part of that was just like watching that unfold was a real honor to be a part of it, let alone be producing it and mixing it and engineering it. It was, it's one of the high points. You think as a career, man, when I pass away, this is probably one of the things they might mention. And I'd be honored if they'd mention that. One of the cool stories was, on this record, we had to sort of piece together the vocals because she was in hospital beds and hotels, and no one vocal was necessarily sung at one time on one microphone. So there was a lot of really incredible things we were doing, trying to match a little USB microphone in a hotel room where she's facing a wall, sitting in a chair, and then another one where she's lying in a bed or on a tour bus somewhere, or just there was a million scenarios in which she sang her vocals, and she was a killer vocalist, like a classic voice until the very end. But it was a real challenge being able to match just the sonics of a C12 that was from, let's say, the tracking date. They went in and she'd sing some scratch vocals. And she may sing the first verse twice, it's that kind of thing. But once for the first verse, once for the second verse. But at least you had a little bit from the first verse. But that second verse might be something coming from a USB mic that was plugged into a laptop in a hotel room. So there were some incredible challenges making those things really match up, and we would go over fourth syllables sometimes. And at the end of it, I was even blown away. You never really have to do that, but I was blown away too, just because to hear how natural it sounded at the end, going from a $10,000 microphone to say like a $250 USB microphone, and back and forth. It was an incredible. That was an incredible part of that record, just being able to access all the media, because she had sang it beautifully at one time or another. It was just a matter of how good was the thing that captured it. Was it hitting an A to D? How was it hitting? Was it hitting a real microphone with a tube in it, or a dynamic mic, or whatever? Right. But thank God, I think there was some divine intervention, and I think before I even started editing that record, to get it into a final form that it was already known that all the parts were there. It was just a matter of searching for them and uncovering them.
It must have felt kind of heavy at some point, knowing that this would likely be her last recording. I mean,
it did feel heavy, but for me, I knew I had a role in that record. So it kind of gave me some purpose. It kind of gave me the ultimate distraction from focusing on the glaring reality. So it was really a blessing, because I was a good fit for that record. I was able to help them get what they needed. And rather than focus on all the tragedy that was sort of playing out in front of us, I was able to focus on the record. Yeah. So,
well, that's really cool. I want to lighten it up just a little bit, because I get emotional a little bit when I think about those two in that record. So, but you said that you had to record vocals like on a hospital bed or whatever. And the other day, you and I were talking, and we were talking about kind of learning things as you go. And I know that you have a long, really eventful history of learning things, and you also teach things. But there's some things that you just learn as you need to know them. Like, how do you get a Grammy-winning record on a USB microphone? But you did it, and then you talked about something. And this is something that's kind of near and dear to me too, because I record orchestras too. I've been to Europe to record orchestras, and you had a similar story. You said that you would accept jobs and then learn how to do them before you had to do the job. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, growing up in Pittsburgh, watching the steel mills go down and watching my dad try to struggle for work and working for minimum wage jobs as a grown man, he would have to take a hall pass to the bathroom because he was working with kids, at Xerox or something like that. And I always felt responsible if I was sitting on the couch. It was like it's your fault sometimes if you're sitting on the couch. So I always felt like if a gig comes and someone's willing to hire me to do something, I should do my best to go ahead and make that record happen or that event happen. Otherwise, I'll be sitting on the couch. So anyone would ask me, I would just say, yeah, I could do that, and then I'd figure it out. And sure, it'd be a lot of anxiety, and you would always be rolling the dice a little bit, but like I said before, 99 times out of 100, you're able to succeed. So I like those odds. And I've had folks ask me to do a billion things that I was not qualified necessarily for. I've mixed sound for Omnimax and surround sound for film and TV. And, I've done, we did a symphony in Pittsburgh where we had to find solutions to double an orchestra when you can't have a conductor conduct the same way twice. So we videotaped the conductor and rolled a big screen TV out there and locked the tape machines to the video, and they double the track. Those kinds of things where you just have to be innovative and pragmatic. I had one of my engineers come to me with a rap session he was doing. A guy was in jail and he couldn't. They were trying to get his rap over the telephone lines during his 10 minutes on the telephone a night, and they couldn't do it because all the compression on the line. So I came in that night after thinking about it, and then I called the guy back the next day and I said, "Hey man, are you at a bank of phones?" He said, "Yeah." So we called him on the phone next to him and played the track through one telephone that he held up to his ear upside down, and then he rapped into the other microphone and we had a clean vocal track.
Oh, wow.
So those are the kinds of things I love about audio, and stepping into a position where you don't know, you hadn't done it, you're uncomfortable, but you can figure out a way to get something done. There's something about that. It's like a little bit of a Rubik's Cube. Going into work with a symphony, I recorded a 55-piece symphony, which is pretty large, timpani, brass, a billion strings. 55 people, when you see them on the floor, it looks like an ocean. Did it at Ocean Way, ironically, here in Nashville. And you just figure out a way to do it, and you're running around, getting all the levels and trying to not make anything go in the red and try to figure it out later, out how to sort of prioritize what you need to do. Next thing you know, they played through the piece once, and you say, "Hey, okay, we're ready to go." And then the conductor looks at you and says, "Wow, you mind if we do it a couple times for us? We're not used to being able to record so quickly." You end up finding a way to get it done, and there's a lot of satisfaction in that. And nothing's, I couldn't imagine sitting in a room and just recording vocals all day, every day. Variety.
So when you're doing stuff like that, do you take anyone with you? I mean, like interns or assistants or anything like that?
I do. I brought my assistant on that gig. Plus, there was a great assistant in Ocean Way, two or three assistants at Ocean Way for a session that big, and they were the real heroes. They had all the mics pointed in the right directions. The left ones were the left ones. The right ones were the right ones. There were no hums. All the cables worked. You get a symphony in there, and you have to replace a cable. It'll cost you $500 worth of union time just to have someone run out and change a cable.
Right.
So to have a crew that's together is really important. Planning is a big part of being successful.
Yeah. So
critical part.
So you were talking the other day. I found out that you're doing a lot of something that I love to do too, and that's mentoring guys in your studio. And I was wondering if maybe you took some of those guys along with some orchestral sessions or any events that you do there. I mean, do you ever learn something as you're teaching?
Nowadays, yes, I do continuously. That's one of those things that you find yourself going, "Oh wow." I just had a buddy talking to me. We were talking about soft knee compression and over easy compression, and I was trying to explain over easy compression to him. And as I had a realization, in regards to the way it engages the waveform. It really is it's like a fishing rod. It lets the ratio go from 1 to 1 up to 1 to whatever you've set it. It unwinds into that rather than just going up in a linear format and truncating into a 10 to 1 compression. And there was a point in that conversation where I actually solidified something in my own mind. So I do love teaching because it's a connection with people that are passionate about what they do. When I was young, my dad would shorten my learning path to things by showing me things that he had done for 20 years. Like if you're sweating a pipe, you could put a piece of Wonder Bread in it, and you sweat the pipe. That's the kind of thing you would never know.
No.
And you end up shortening your pathway, taking the great things. Although I've worked with Phil Ramone and Frank Filippetti and Eddie Kramer and all these great engineers. When I was coming up, I was able to take from them what I loved. Daniel Landwall did some stuff that blew my mind, and now that's mine. I do it a little differently. It's printed through my DNA, but I love being the person that helps folks sort of get a shorter pathway. And I always tell people that my truth isn't necessarily their truth, but I bet you they overlap about 80 to 90%.
Right.
And you could take that, put your thumbprint on it, and now it's yours. It's no longer mine. And being a part of somebody that is passionate and being a part of their journey and helping them get there. One of my guys won a Grammy on this Joey and Rory record. One of these guys had studied under me. He was in his bedroom making recordings on a laptop a year earlier. And a year later, he's getting a statue, in Los Angeles. So that's pretty incredible. I look at that and I think I was a part of his story. I was a part of him doing that. Mm-hmm. And I take great joy out of seeing other people sort of achieve their goals, be able to fulfill their passions, become realized, have their story that they've been, all of us have our own story that we don't quite know yet. We're reading through our story. And to be on a page in the book of their story is something to that, especially if it's connected with passion. Mm-hmm. I just love being around people. I feed off of it. People that are passionate, that have a light in their eyes, that have a true, untainted love for something. I want to be that. I want to stay that. So I find the best ways to be around folks that feel that way.
Yeah. It seems like to me that people who systematically give of their time, give of their knowledge, like you, the more opportunity that's rewarded or awarded for doing such a thing. I mean, to me, there's nothing more exciting to me than to know that I just explained something in a way that somebody finally understands it. I mean, that to me, that's a win.
Well, especially when you think back in your own life, for you to learn that, how many trees you had to bump into in the dark, mm-hmm. right before you actually saw the light. And then to be able to show them that and have them get it and realize the value that what you just gave them was kind of like a secret.
Right. I love it. So, you're doing a mentoring program now. Tell me a little bit about, like an official. I know you always do it and it's kind of part of your DNA, but you're kind of making it available to, other people. So tell me a little bit about that.
It's based off apprenticeships. My father was an apprentice in the steel mill, and he learned how to become a roll turner at Jones and Laughlin Steel by studying under a guy that was a master at it, that had been doing it his whole life, till eventually my father got his own machine, and then he taught someone. And, as I did a little more research into apprenticeships, I found out that's how the pyramids were built, that's how the samurai were trained. And, when you think about how we don't even know how the pyramids were built today, how they did that, it shows you the value of studying under somebody who is a master at something, somebody who has done it so many times that it's a muscle reflex for them, and that they can come to a point in a road and they could take 10 different directions to get around whatever obstacle it is, because they see it for what it is and they have a total comprehension of it. So I love the idea of that. I love the idea of teaching someone to fish rather than giving them a fish, mm-hmm. and then watching people take that and have ownership over that. So the whole school is based off of an apprenticeship. It only takes 10 individuals. And we have people from 18. I've got a guy coming down today to look for housing for the fall semester. He's 46. So it's all runs and gamuts of life. It's people that are passionate as at 48, at 50, or people that are passionate at 18. We sort of have we have a one semester concentrated 16-week course where those folks will, on a Monday, let's say, we'll have a 3-hour class as 10 people. And then the rest of the week, they're on one-on-one with me. We just sort of work through, build a program that covers our core disciplines, but then goes into the person's specific passion and where they end up seeing their focus being. And then we sort of do a fellowship where I'm trying to help them get a 3-year plan and be successful in regards to technically and intellectually what they need to be doing in order to accomplish those goals. So it's really scalable. Each person's program is a little different based on where they see themselves coming out the other side of it. Once we meet that core curriculum, we end up and really focus on what it is they do.
Wow, it sounds like you've put a lot of thought into mentoring and apprenticeship. And you're right. Apprenticeship. When I was coming up, I worked under or around guys who showed me how to do things. I mean, sometimes I had to seek it out, but when you're coming up through Nashville, a lot of times you would be an intern, and then you would be an assistant, and then you would be a first engineer, and then if you were really good and you had the wherewithal, you could become a producer, and then you could. I mean, there are guys that you can name off that took that exact same path.
That's what I took. Yeah.
And then, but the sad thing is that doesn't really happen anymore because everybody's going to YouTube, learning YouTube videos, joining sites that they can do it on their own. And what they're missing a lot of times is that one-on-one kind of like in the studio, let me show you why I do this, or hear the difference between that. There's an intangible there that you can't emulate anywhere else except being within arm's reach of a person. So
and somebody that you trust too. A lot of the times, I would read these Digi-User conferences that Pro Tools used to have a Digi-User conference that had you could post audio, and this is probably 20 years ago, 15 years ago, and you'd hear these guys, you'd read their posts, and you'd think that they were just the greatest engineer, and then they would post a little sample of their mix, and you'd be like, oh my God, I can't believe I almost listened to that guy. So there is there's a purity in being able to find people that you respect, and people that have done what you want to do, and being able to study under them. It's a brilliant thing, and even in me coming up, some guys didn't want to tell you why they were doing what they were doing. They saw it as competition rather than embracing it and seeing it as a community and really wanting the art to be appreciated for what it is, and people's sort of pursuits trying to help people out in that regard. It takes a different muscle, a different imprint on your DNA to want to do that stuff. And when I find folks like that, I'm just a sponge. I suck up whatever they'll give me.
Mm-hmm. That's really cool. Well, so is there a website that you can go to find out more about what you're...
Sure.
Yeah, it's apprenticesacademy.net. So my website, of course, is joe-west.com. The Apprentice Academy website is apprenticesacademy.net. And everything you should need to know is right there on that front page. It's a real simple website. It sort of shows you what we're doing. I just finished shooting a really cool video that we're going to be partnering with Waves Plugins on. It's going to be a mixed competition. I know that there's a lot of people that put files up, but I put up a session of mine that is all it's a fantastic recording. There's no stems. It's a full blown, as if you were going to be the mix engineer receiving these files from a band across the country. You'll get every file I had. So it's a mix session that you'll take and mix. I shot the video of sort of my approach and what my thoughts are on it. And we're about to post that coming up soon. It's going to be a 30-day competition that you'll be able to download a zip file with everything you need. And then you'll be able to mix it, post it to our Apprentice Academy Facebook page. And whoever wins with the most likes will end up having a Skype interview with me that we will then use as our final video for the series, as well as winning some Waves plugins. And two runners-ups will also win Waves plugins. Awesome. The whole group will get a discount code for some Waves plugins. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
Okay, well, cool. I'll put all the notes from this session, all the links that you talked about. If you go to mixcoach.com/Joe West, no spaces, I'll make sure that you guys get all of this, all of these URLs. And hey, Joe, man, thanks for the chat today, man. I enjoyed it. I'm inspired myself, and it makes me want to either not beat up on myself so much for not getting everything done, or work harder. I mean, I hear when I hear great musicians, I say that makes me want to practice all night and then quit in the morning. But you're doing some great stuff, man.
Thanks,
keep
buddy.
up the good
So
work.
are you.
Thank you. Keep up the good work, and thanks again for the chat.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to the Mix Coach podcast. Make sure to head over to your podcast service of choice and rate and review the show.